Perfect. 1 o'clock and we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Tim, we'll just give people a moment to join, if that's all right with you.
Yep.
The joys of live podcast recording is that we actually are live and allow people to join and ask questions, right? I've not done this. You said this is the first time you've been on StreamYard. So whilst people are joining, I'll give you the download. On the right-hand side, if you put your cursor on comments, that's where you'll see people who want to ask questions. And we encourage you, if you're listening already, to ask questions and ask Tim questions around his knowledge. I'm a big believer that people who have questions probably will ask better questions than I will do, because they have their own frame of reference and maybe want to ask something specific to a specific scenario. So actually, I think it's a really good example when you get someone like Tim on, who's got a lot of knowledge and experience in these situations. So please do get involved. And if you're here already, say hi. We're looking forward to getting involved and getting started. But look, we got 15 seconds, Tim, and 90-second mark, we'll get started.
Awesome.
How are you anyway? All right?
Good, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking about that particular question and how people don't really give an answer to it that is authentic, like saying that you had a bad night's sleep or your stomach hurts today or something like that. But people are just saying, yes, we're all good.
Yeah. All right, mate. Yeah, thanks. But I know you wake up at 5 o'clock because you just told me. So I can imagine after this, maybe an afternoon nap might be in order.
Yeah, by accident. I didn't mean to.
It was kind of by accident, but you knew there was a reason for it as well. But mate, look, let's get started. Thank you so much for giving me your time to start with. I really appreciate this. Obviously, we've been catching up a couple of times, and so I'm really glad that I can get you on here to share your knowledge around a little bit around coaching, a little bit around performance, a little bit around pressure environments. I'm really interested to see where this conversation goes and what you share. I know you've been in some really kind of elite environments, and so I'm interested to see what knowledge you can share from those for people and what lessons there are maybe we can take into the corporate world. So I'm excited to see what we gain from this. So look, to get started, let's have a quick introduction. Right? Can you tell me / the audience, I know who you are, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, I always struggle with this question. I know what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about helping them achieve their goals. And we're passionate about human storytelling as well. Not necessarily I'm a fantastic storyteller, but I really think it's valuable for humans to tell their story and explore it as a source of not only like human connection, but also growth. So that has led to the coaching work that I do nowadays, but also a project which I'm sure we'll talk about later around human stories and creating a global network of interesting individuals. So my background's initially as a physical performance coach, but I've always been interested in the mental side of things, how people learn and develop. Back when I should have been writing S&C programs at Leicester Tigers, I was thinking more about how players can make better notes in meetings to help them learn and translate that into performance on the pitch. So it was always there. And then that has led to various other things which we can explore throughout the podcast in terms of reflective practice, coaching, and high performance.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think I resonated with you because we have a very similar path, maybe in slightly different aspects, but come from that sports science background. Love sports, but love how people perform, not only just from an output perspective, but also the stuff behind the performance as well. And so, it was really nice to have that conversation initially, and then to bring that to this. We were talking about performance in high pressure environments, and you made a really good point before we started around. I don't normally help people manage high pressure. It's the environments that you manage. So it'd be interesting just for you to share kind of that. So what's the difference between pressure and then high pressure environments? just so we can set the stage as such for this conversation.
Yes, definitely. So I work as a coach with leaders and performers in high pressure environments. But I think pressure is relative and performance is relative. So we're performing right now. And I think unless we're sat on the sofa in our pants, we're performing in different arenas of life. So I think it's actually about the marrying up of the individual, their resources, their skills, backgrounds, their emotional regulation, all these different things that the individual is made up of, married up with the environment and the demands of that environment. My work sits at, I guess, the centre of that and helping them navigate the reality that they're faced with day to day. Sometimes that is related to handling pressure, but because I'm not a chartered sport and exercise psychologist, I have a doctorate in reflective practice and decision making. That's more what I lean into to help you discover and develop the resources to cope with their jobs, and that might mean pressure. So yeah, I can definitely talk about stories where people have handled pressure, but I probably can't pick apart the dynamics and the mechanisms behind pressure today.
Yeah. Okay. And I just want to pick up something, because you said obviously you gained a doctorate at the age of 29, which I'm very jealous of. You're still 29, maybe 30 now, but 29, right?
30, yeah.
30 now. Okay. So you gained a doctorate by 30, which is super impressive. But you just said it's in decision making and reflective practice. Can you just give us a little bit of details of what that looks like and what that means?
What is reflective practice? Well, first of all, I think it's something that turns a lot of people off to start with. It doesn't sound particularly sexy. But I think it's reflection itself is something that people do every day. We're doing it right now. We're reflecting as we go through this conversation. So it's something we're all doing. I think adults learn primarily through experience and reflection upon that experience. So if that's our main source of learning, if we can get better at reflecting, so being more intentional about it, maybe being more structured about it, we can make more of the experiences that we're having on a day-to-day basis. So that's the position that I come from. If you look at any critique of reflective practice, it might call it navel gazing. And if you Google the term navel gazing, you'll be met with a picture of a sculpture of like a few statues looking at their belly button. And the idea is basically that people criticize reflection as this excessive introspection where it doesn't really add anything to what you're doing. I think reflection has to be intimately linked to the sort of swampy lowlands that you're going through every day. What are you really trying to achieve, and how can you just iterate your practice? A bit like product development in a business. You are the product. How can you iterate your product day after day? How I see it.
Yeah, and I can see. So you said when you mentioned it earlier on, it's like reflective practice and decision making, and I feel like the decision making is the important part to that reflective practice. Because if we just reflect, then don't make change or don't decide to do something afterwards, then it's just, as you said, just looking down, right, at that visual you explained. So it's the decision making off the back of it. But then it comes to this concept about self-awareness, and the more knowledge you have, the better decision you can make. Is that kind of tied into this concept as well?
Yeah, it is. And there's a guy called Donald Sean years ago who he was like the godfather of reflective practice. And he one of his models was single and double loop learning, where you have something that happens in your life, and very commonly you tend to look at your actions and behaviors which led or contributed to that happening. But very infrequently do we look at the beliefs, biases, and assumptions which underpin the actions and behaviors that you choose. And reflecting on those would be your double loop. I think that's that's the bit that many people miss when they're thinking about reflection. So that a lot of my work is helping people with understanding which beliefs and assumptions are driving their development over time.
So great. I can imagine you put really deep in your coaching sessions to get to those assumptions and beliefs.
As long as the client is open to it, yes.
Yeah. And I can look. It's weird, isn't it? When you're on a podcast, you talk about it, but we've had these conversations, and I know I can see that from you as well. The conversations we've had, I can definitely see that you're comfortable getting deep and asking those meaningful questions. So yeah, I love that. Look, I want to get back into the topic of high pressure. So we spoke about the difference between the actual pressure, but the environment as well. And I know that you've worked across elite military and professional sports. What's the thing that stands out, or the thing that you found that high performers do really well in those situations? Maybe like a thing where they do well, but maybe saying which is also different to what you would think as well. So maybe there's two areas, or maybe it's the one thing which stands out for both.
I think setting intentions, thinking about what your intention actually is for the thing you're about to do. It's all too common that people float through the thing, they go through the motions. So I'm not saying that each of those populations or high performers in business all do this in terms of intentions. I think you get pockets of excellence within each environment that you've just mentioned there. But the people who are excellent, that are high achieving and high performing, tend to be really rigorous about saying what they want to achieve, and then closing the loop on that with, did I achieve it? If not, why? And just going through that cycle repeatedly.
And can you give an example of how to do that well, or how high performers do that well?
It's a very personal process, I think. I could talk about some high performers use coaches, but that's not accessible for everybody. I mean, reflective practice is one way of doing it, but I don't think it's the only way. I think I can talk about my experience with the military and creating what we call the technical model there. So we had a period of sort of like 2.5 years, 3 years, where we were exploring, we were doing the best that we could with the understanding that we had. And that was kind of like research in the environment, what works for different people. And then at a particular point, we felt like we really needed to consolidate all that knowledge into a document. And we looked at what are the really clear objectives that we want to achieve. What are the training factors that are holding us back from achieving those objectives? What are we going to measure our output based on? And then it went right down from vision, mission to objectives, strategy, tactics, our research and development. How did that align with our different verticals? So I think as a team, that wasn't just an individual process of refining our ways of working. That was a team process where we achieved a greater level of alignment, created a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve, shared language, which really helps with having a shared understanding. And because we had clear KPIs from how we measure, for example, our engagement with military personnel, that allowed us to keep a track on how we were doing. And KPIs are common, but it's not so common to make sure you've got the right KPI for the right objective.
I see KPIs in organizations as indicators on the work they do, not on the way that they work. So like concept of don't look at the result, look at the performance, which created the result. And I feel like that's kind of touching on what you just said, rather than just going, this is the output of that, and this is, we're going to measure that KPI. We're actually looking at how we're doing to achieve that KPI, and we can adjust like every football or every sports game does. They debrief the game, not the result. Is that kind of what you're saying here?
Yeah, we were trying to shift from outcome to process. also getting really clear on what the outcome actually was that we wanted, but making sure that we got lost in the process, and then periodically came out, tested those KPIs and refined that process. So it's very much like a spiral process where we went up and down.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when we think about those environments, you think exciting, high pressure. To me, and you hear this in a lot of elite environments, it sounds like the boring basics. Yeah. And you're just measuring these key things, behaviors, which just need to happen consistently. And when they do, you continue them. And if they aren't working, then you change them to something else, which is a repeated behavior.
Yeah. I remember a particular meeting that I sat in before we created that technical model. And I was the only one in the room of about 20, maybe 15, who said, what are we actually here to achieve in this room? And everybody got into me. And I did question at the time whether I was overthinking it. But we then went on a journey of really clearly defining what we were there to achieve. And it led to significant growth of the program. So, I think you imagine these environments, whether it's in sport, business, elite military, and anywhere you go, there's still things being done mindlessly or without a clearly refined process.
Yeah, for sure. And then, well, I want to throw this concept of high pressure environment, right? When there is pressure on, we talk about reflective practice or the intentionality of processes, right? Because that's where it all started, right? It was being intentional. I see as soon as you put pressure into that situation, that people choose not to be intentional. They go into, what's the word I want to use here? Just like doing the things rather than being intentional about the where they go with those things, because of there's this pressure on that. Do you see that as well?
In terms of people going to their default when the pressure comes on?
Yeah.
I do. I think it's only normal. For a start, it's very normal. And I think that's why it's important. Again, not an expert on pressure specifically, but I think it's important to, much like you would go into the gym and gradually overload maybe your strength and power work, you gradually overload and practice regularly the ability to cope with pressure. So the appraisal of a situation from stressful to exciting and from a threat to an opportunity. I think if you practice that regularly, you'd be more able to cope with pressure. But again, there are so many other things that come into it. For example, your physiological state on that particular day. The environment might throw a really different curveball at you that you've not expected. So it really does depend. And you'll hear me say it depends loads.
Because it does, right? Because I actually listened to something earlier on, is you are one of one. So the way that you handle things is going to be unique to the way that you need to handle things. So it does depend on the person you're talking to or the situation you're in.
Absolutely. And it makes me think of this phrase that came up a lot in my doctorate. It was actually from a guy called Bob Muir, Dr. Bob Muir, and he wouldn't take credit for it either. He probably read it somewhere else. But what works for who, in which context and why? And it's this idea that like every situation is different, every human's different, and your response to each of those situations will need to be different to meet the demands. So yeah, I'm really not a big believer in this is the system you should use to achieve success. That's not my way of working at all.
Yeah, and it's also why us as coaches don't adopt the advice given model. It's because what works for you works, yeah, however you just kind of explain that model, right?
Yeah.
I want to move into metacognition and clarity, right? And this is another part that I think reflective practice creates, but also something I know that you're very much interested in working with people on, and I think you see it as a super important role in performance, right? And so you talk a lot about kind of this metacognition and clarity in chaos situations. Can you just expand on that for us, just so people have got an awareness what that is for performance and the impact on performance?
I think let's think about it as a human's ability to think about thinking, to sort of like step above where they're at and just look down upon what they're doing. So it might be being aware of your own biases. It might be being aware of your own thought processes. For example, like, I feel like an imposter in this room. I shouldn't be here right now. Being aware of that, and then going, I'm not going to succumb to that. I want to act like this. My intention is to act like this instead. Those are examples of thinking about your thinking in a productive way. And I think some of the best decision makers, Charlie Munger, who used to work with Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, he seems like one of those types of people, where he's employing like mental models to structure his thinking about the world. So I think the best performers are continually developing a mental model or a way of thinking about their practice, their work, and refining that mental model. So let's see it this way: something happens, you attribute some of what happened to the actions and behaviours that you did, and that's the start place for your mental model. And next time, different situation, do the same thing, but you have a different outcome. A high performer and someone who's good at thinking about thinking would be starting to develop more of a relativistic perspective on the tools and skills that they've got available. So that's talking about this thing works in this situation, but not in that situation. And I think the coaching work that I think we both do certainly supports individuals to refine that mental model. And what it creates is something called adaptive expertise. So you become an expert in what you're doing that can adapt to lots of different situations.
Because of past experiences, right? And the reflection on that.
And the processing of those those experiences.
Thinking about thinking, for some reason, is in my head, and I'm struggling to understand thinking about thinking. And I don't know why I'm struggling to get to grasp this concept. So you're thinking about the thought you had when you did something. Am I on the same wavelength here, or can you just explain that for me?
I'd argue you're doing it right now. So as you've been listening to me, you've been thinking, this doesn't quite make sense to me. And you've caught yourself in a different situation. You might have gone, I'm just going to pretend I understand. But in this situation, you've put your ego to the side and you've gone, no, I want to understand that. I'm aware that I don't understand. And I'm going to construct a question to build my understanding on it. So I think that's a good example in practice right now. Does that help you?
Yeah. I had to let my ego go a little bit. I'll cover my ego in my question, but yes. Yes, it does. Okay, amazing. And so then can we bring the business world or the leaders in business or in environments of elite performance into this? And can you create some examples that you can see or have worked with that help them?
Help them achieve a high level of performance?
A high level of performance through metacognition and clarity in those chaos situations.
I think quite a bit of work recently has been about supporting coaches to get through playoffs, which is cool. It's like the pointy end of the season, and again the pressure's on them. And for some of them, the one coach in particular that I think of, with him it was very much about helping him get out of his own way and get out of the way of the players. So he spent all season creating a culture and developing skills for these players and in these players, such that they can go and express them on the ice, and coming up with lots of last-minute tactics and tools and themes and narratives to try and whether it's giving a motivational boost to the last minute, that's almost going against the thing that he's built. So the coach that I'm talking about, credit to him, he came with that challenge and said, this is what I'm thinking of. Am I right? What should I be doing with this? So he's got the blessing of already having a head start and that self-awareness. So we discussed back to his intentions. What was he actually trying to achieve? And by returning to his intentions, we worked out that installing these new things and adding more cognitive load to the players wasn't going to help them perform and be in the moment on the ice. And then very often it's about helping people come up with a phrase to remember, or like a routine to go through at the start of the day, for example, that supports them to just catch themselves from exhibiting a behaviour that they don't actually want to exhibit. Yeah.
It's a really good example of overthinking for performance when actually sometimes you don't need to do that. I like that example. And it's such a hard thing to do because you're always thinking, what do I need to do to be successful? And my time as a sports coach, I think you're always in that mode. What do I need to do? What can be different? What can be better? But actually, as you said, sometimes if you build those basic things, sometimes actually just let those things work. I also like that lesson there as well.
Yeah, I think it does translate to people's careers as well. I know certainly having started my business last May, you have periods that are busy, periods that are quieter. But for me, my thinking would be effectively zooming out, seeing the bigger picture and the trend over time, and trying to be clear about which things actually move the needle and what's noise, which is quelling some unarticulated anxiety that you've got. So yeah, I think these are universal. You can put them in any environment and help people think about their thinking.
Have you got a starting point? So somebody maybe who isn't, let's use the word self-aware, using that, thinking about thinking, how would you help them start or even just implement that today?
Starting points are always funny because I believe that the entry point is the entry point. So if someone does just want me to give them feedback on whether a head coach should stay or not, that's the contract that we've set up, and it might not be focused on self-awareness at all. So I think what it's actually about at that point in the early stages of the coaching relationship is trust, building trust, building momentum. But also I think sometimes the people engaging the work with myself and yourself, they're naturally tending towards being more self-aware anyway, which is part of the problem of the field a little bit. The people who need it most often don't engage. But how would you get people to, if they're lacking in self-awareness, to become more self-aware? I'd return to intentions. So what are you trying to achieve? What do you expect to happen based on what you do? So you go into a sales pitch, you expect certain things to happen, and then whatever reality is, there's a gap between the two. Supporting people to explore that gap should, under the right conditions, if they feel safe to explore that gap, start to build some self-awareness. But it's as I said, it's not for everybody. If you look at, there's something called psychological characteristics of developing excellence, by Dave Collins and other researchers who will be angry that I didn't name them. And it's a list of qualities or characteristics which determine, at the time, it was young players' excellence or their ability to capitalize on their potential. And one of those was realistic performance evaluation. Many of us like goal setting and the ability to seek social support. But realistic performance evaluation has always stood out to me as something critical for high performance. Because unless you can clearly work out what the difference is between where you're at and where you need to be, then you won't be able to set out a proper plan of development to bridge that gap. So that's what comes to my mind when you ask that question.
I love that. And do you know what? It's so the business world is so behind in that thinking. And the reason why I say that is I've worked with, I've done 1,000 hours of coaching now, right? So I think we've worked with nearly 300 leaders. And then we talk about that type of topic, reflective and understanding what works and what doesn't work, and maybe the performance piece. And you bring in the concept of debriefs. And I know this comes from both sport and in elite military. They do this at every opportunity. I know military use the hot cold debriefs, right? In their kind of reviews of performance. Sport do it in the moment after the game. Let's reflect quickly what went well, what went badly, and then they have a cold debrief when they reflect on the performance of each individual player and as a team, a collective. In the business, is something that we just they start to do when you talk to them about it, and they see, well, okay, well, why am I not doing this? But they just don't do it if they don't know about it.
In terms of having a real intentional approach to bridging the gap, I think maybe some of that comes from the amount of time which is spent on training versus execution. Because there's a significant skew between the military probably spends 99% time training versus 1% execution. The sports world, somewhere in the middle, depends on the sport. And then in the not the professional world, but the corporate world, business world, you probably spend more than 99% on the job versus doing training. So I think by nature of that, it doesn't necessarily facilitate the employees exploring the gap so much. And are they incentivized to, would be another question. So I think it does depend on the individual and the organization, but certainly the ones that I work with, they value it, and they tend to make quicker progress with less friction and retain more staff as a result of engaging in this type of work.
And I also believe it probably creates better psychological safety as well, because you're encouraging that to happen in those feedback sessions.
It depends on how well those sessions are facilitated. I've seen and heard of it being done really poorly. I think a lot of it comes down to the leader modeling and demonstrating. People talk a lot about vulnerability. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to cry in the boardroom, but being vulnerable enough to acknowledge the areas that you're developing in as well, the parts of the mission that you didn't do so well. And also, I think it comes down to the quality of your questions that you ask people. So certain types of questions, I think, that start with like a why, tend to put people's backs up. Like, why did you do it this way? As opposed to asking employees, could you talk us through your thinking and what made you choose that option versus this one? It feels like less of a threat and less of a critique.
Yeah, I like that awareness. I wrote down the word why. I also think in coaching we would use the contracting around it, right? But the contracting and the framing of why we are doing this. We're doing this to find the gaps. We're doing this to help us perform better as a team. And if you can connect to that deeper purpose of the team, and I think then there's obviously the whole chunk of work we need to do first there to understand what values are, what the purpose of the team is. But once we got that, then you can go back to, okay, look, we're looking to improve this process, performance, quality of work. And so this is useful. This feedback and reflective practice is going to be really great for us.
Yeah, contracting is something I have to constantly work on myself. It's always work on. But yeah, I think as long as you've done that well, you know the box within which you're exploring with people. I was thinking before this about an example of that, and there's a company that recently decided to try and be more high performance. There's a big trend. People want to be high performance, often don't know what it means, but it's like a flashy tagline. They wanted to be more high performance, and so their interpretation of it was that they wanted to be to hold people more accountable and to drive standards. But what they came up against was this a resistance based on what the previous contract was. So when the employees first came in, the agreement, whether it was written down, spoken, unspoken, was that was what was expected of them. Now more was being expected of them, but that hadn't been communicated. They've been told it wasn't good enough. And the foundation of trust also wasn't there. There was very little modelling of vulnerability. So they went away and started to work on a bit of a narrative about why they're all there, why are we here, what's our mission together, what's each of our individual journeys, and how do those journeys tie into what the mission is for the company. And I think that collective shared understanding of why you're all there is probably the most important thing that gets missed out. I was doing some writing yesterday and reflecting on many clients talk about this like a new generation of workers. People complain about less resilience, people not staying as long. And I think whilst it depends on the person entirely, one person that I spoke to, he was a bit of an expert in like culture and sees a lot of young individuals, runs a lot of venues actually up in Leeds, and he tries to get people to go to these venues and create spaces that inspire people and create community. And what he's noticed relevant to this new generation of workers is that due to social media and the internet, you can go online and find like a niche community for anything. So his belief was that, especially younger people who've always known social media, they know that what community feels like. So when they're in a job that feels like it's not quite cutting the mustard, they know something better does exist. Versus years ago, when where you spent your time was based on geographical proximity, and you didn't know something better was out there. So that's led to, he thinks, people spending less time at companies, and the number one reason for moving on being a lack of purpose.
It's an interesting concept, and probably one we could get into. But I don't want to use your time like that. I want to use your time towards this performance concept. I know you. So you do a lot of one-to-one work, but you also do a lot of team work. Right, and the thing I think is faces a lot of high performing teams is this concept of psychological safety, the ability to feel safe and share their thoughts and feelings and notice things that maybe aren't going awry. How do you help teams create that psychological safety?
It's tough, and it's a contested term anyway.
Go on.
I think I'm also not an expert on it. So I think where I'm coming from on that is how do you make performers feel comfortable with the environment to share their thoughts, their ambitions, and acknowledge their failures. In the work that I do a lot of facilitation of groups. In those settings, it is very much based on modeling it myself. So giving them examples of how I would answer particular questions, especially in the context of my work with them. Then also, again, it comes back to your point of contracting. So making it clear at the outset of our work that this is a space where we're going to have a growth mindset. We're going to be encouraging of each other. And I think that's critical. I mean, what goes on behind my back when I'm not there, I can't really control that. But yeah, safety is not necessarily always, the psychological safety might not always be what's needed to get to performance as well. I'm not saying that everyone should feel threatened all the time, but I think there's a sweet spot where people can feel safe enough to explore ideas and to acknowledge failures, but enough pressure to expand their boundaries and keep performing.
Can you share the second part, the latter part there? What do you mean by that? Yeah, right. So that there's still a little bit of psychological, the safety needed, but how the pressure and create. Yeah, can you just explain that bit for me?
I think it'd be summarised by safe enough. What is safe enough? And it's not about creating an environment where everything's soft and cuddly necessarily. Because if you think about some of the things which make people ambitious and make people drive towards things, it's not necessarily a soft and cuddly environment.
Yeah, I hear you now.
Yeah.
Because my head. Well, if it's soft and cuddly and safe, then you can skip expectations, and it feels safe, and there's no retribution. It's probably a word which I don't want to use, but we're going to use it anyway for the conversation. But just of failure. Well, if it's okay and I feel safe to fail, then I will fail. And if that leads to nothing and there's no pressure to deal with that failure, then why would I deal with that failure? It's just failure. Am I on the right tracks here?
Yeah. As I say, I'm not an expert in this area, but I do believe that let's say accountability. If there's no accountability in everyone, and the thing that we're seeking is safety for everybody, then how do we progress as an organisation?
Let's move on. Just a couple of bits left. I want to just discuss with you. I want to look at from a real life standpoint, a real world standpoint in regards to performance, and some of the lessons you could maybe share with us. Have you got an example where someone maybe has transformed how they performed in a pressurized environment, and then maybe what was the key turning point that allowed that transformation?
So many, but yeah, I think my mind goes to this head coach who got his dream job last summer. And for him, it was very much around, he got the job for a reason. He's got a particular skill set, he's got a track record of success, But then it got to the point where, and quite naturally, I think, you think about trying to make a really good first impression, because you think, right, the pressure's going to be on in the first 10 games. I need to perform. So suddenly the idea is that you need to layer on lots of new things. So for him specifically, we spent a lot of time in pre-season, actually, getting really clear on who he was as a coach, what he believed, what led to his success in the past, and breaking down what the season would look like at different staging posts, where he wanted to feed in new ideas, whether it be individual development plans for the players, where he wants to give more autonomy to his assistant coaches, free himself up more for the strategic stuff, or to look after the player leadership group. So for him, it was very much about planning, creating like what if plans, understanding what his vision was for the culture. Specifically, he's very much about language. How do we, and an American guy working with a language barrier over in Europe, it was about getting clear on how do we communicate the messages about who we are as a team. So yeah, for him, our work was create a space for him to explore, be challenged by myself, and he had a fantastic season.
Yeah. And as you said, and maybe it goes back to this thinking about thinking, so actually getting out to thinking about the thought process of what the season looked like, and actually getting out of his own way of going, well, I don't need to change anything. This is the reason why I'm here.
Yeah, I think.
And then being able to think about that and put it onto paper in a structured, thought out way.
For me, that comes back to he was going to reflect anyway.
Yeah.
The coaching provided, it turned it from overthinking into this is structured and it's got a particular output which is going to help you. That's what it felt like.
Be interesting from coach to coach, right? Is how much do you move that person on? So how much of it is guided versus how much of it is led by them? Does that question make sense for you?
It does, and it's something I wrestle with every day. How much of myself do I give to, do I impose on the coaching relationship versus how much do I create space and use their resources? So I think it's a balance, and it comes back to what they actually want, where they're at, how much trust we have in the relationship. So yeah, I'm skewed more towards I'm going to work with your resources as much as possible, because you're the one that's going to be in the middle of battle, doing this under pressure. You need to know how to make decisions. It's not for me to give you the answers. I also think that people, if you give them more autonomy, they tend to realise, and give them lots of agency, they tend to realise that they've got mostly what they need. And that's a really nice thing to feel as a coach, that you can make someone self-sufficient.
Oh, yeah, completely agree. It was just thinking about how you put that into these key parts. I would love to have seen that session and how that would have worked. It would have been a really interesting one, fly on the wall kind of moment. Look, can I ask that same question around how you've helped someone transform, but put it to a team aspect as well? How have you helped an example of like a team perform well, and how they transferred that pressure environment?
Yeah, I think again depends what they're trying to achieve, but there's like a season-long story I can tell you, and then there's probably like a moment story that I can tell you. And the season-long would be we're just building more of a high-performance culture where people are thinking more about, as a coaching setup, how do we positively impact the players that we've got for this season or 2 seasons. And I think a lot of coaches think about what session they're going to program. How does that maybe fit into a curriculum over a period of time? But they maybe don't think so much about the coaching behaviour which matches up with that session. So in this particular case study, it was very much about like, how do we support these players to develop the skills necessary to win in playoffs? And some of it was around communication. Some of it was around empowering a play leadership group to lead the group and allow the coaches to step back a little bit. Some of it was actually about the human performance side of things, so getting the nutrition right. Some of these 18-year-old ice hockey players were going into practice, not having breakfast, in the gym, straight onto the ice, no carbs or protein, coming off the ice, and then they wouldn't eat until like 2 p.m. So they'd be going from about 9 p.m. the night before to 2 p.m. the next day, not eating anything. So we can talk about reflective practice all we want, but if your brain's not functioning because of a poor nutrition strategy, then we need to address those things first. So that's sort of like a bit of an example of how we shift an organisation. And then there were moments towards the start of playoffs this year where there's one particular team who wanted to get better at emotionally resetting themselves when there's like a bad ref call or they were 3-1 down, actually, this particular team, third period, and there was a media timeout, so they're all on the bench. And they decided eventually to implement this reset that we've been discussing for a while, which was just to create physical contact between the players with the intention of breaking tension and getting people to be a bit more present and loose. Everybody on the bench did 3 fist bumps with different people. And I've seen a video of it. One bench looked like a hive of activity, like a beehive. The other one, they were just sat down doing what you'd normally do. And they reported back that it changed their energy, changed their approach, and they came from 3-1 down to win the game. And I think moments like that are really useful for building buy-in, because they started to do that consistently then in moments of adversity. So sometimes it's a big, grand, let's do this thing over a season. Other times it's just a moment, a spark that causes something.
Yeah, a reflective moment or a thing which snaps you out of the pressure, maybe the environmental pressure as well, right? I'm now just picturing the advice I'm going to give my future sessions. So what I want you to do is free fist bumps in these exec meetings. I love it.
I'm certainly not advocating that this is a solution for everybody. I'm just...
You said it now, mate. You said it. This is what experts have to live with, mate. Unfortunately.
I know. Unfortunately, yeah. They found it useful.
Yeah, I love it.
Also.
Tim, mate, look, thank you ever so much for being here. Let's finish on a nugget, I guess. What if there's one thing that you want to leave this session with the people listening? What's that nugget of information or piece of advice?
Oh, I think the power of questions. So if you come across great questions that you feel like disrupt your natural day-to-day and make you think about stuff, store them up, put them in your notes. And I've shown you before, I've got a reflective wheel. So a random number generator or option generator on my phone. Load them up into something like that. Your favorite questions, spin it once a day. And what I find that to be really useful for is just disrupting my flow and providing me 30 seconds of thinking about things from a different perspective.
Yeah, I like the disrupting the flow. I think it's a really interesting concept. I love that. Tim, what's next for you? I know you got a lot going on, so just can you share this for people listening, so people can get some excitement over what's going to happen next for you?
Yeah. Well, I love my coaching work. Really fulfilled by my coaching work, so that'll continue. I'm also writing a book called "Don't Talk to Strangers," which is based on having spoken to over 120 strangers from all 7 continents around the world, with the intention of just learning more about the world outside of like my little sort of enclave that I spend my time in most of the time. So yeah, I value people's stories and learning from their stories. So I'll be hopefully in sort of 2027, probably back in 2027. Yeah, bringing that up.
I love that. And you, I think, and so you can correct me if I'm wrong here, you record these as well and you put them onto a podcast as well?
So what's a little bit different about these is they're anonymous.
Okay.
With people that you mostly never heard of.
Okay.
And what that allows for is just a much deeper exploration.
Fine. Mate, look, I'm super excited for that, and I'm super excited for your future, and hopefully, to be along that journey with you and supporting you along that, mate. I wish you all the best. Thank you ever so much for sharing all this knowledge, and I feel sure there's probably another session in the future to get some more of that knowledge out here. So yeah, look, thank you again for your time.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you for your time, Rich.
Wicked. Cheers, everybody else. If you stay where you are, everybody else, week off next week, although I am having a live session talking about the playbook I've created. So if you want to learn more about that, then please come along. And then back to normal regime the week after the next podcast. So keep an eye on that. For everybody else, have a lovely week, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.